Okay, let's see how quick we can actually build a RESTful API using Node. And for the first lesson that we're actually going to code, which is this one, we're going to not obviously build the full API, but we're going to show you how quick it is to get something to actually happen with our code. Let's jump right in. So the first thing that I'm going to do is actually create a new directory for my project. So you'll see up here we have C var demos. In my case is where I'm going to put my code. And I'm just going to make a new folder called node_API. So that's my folder. Right now it has nothing in it. And the next thing that I'm going to do is open up my PowerShell, which you can go to by just typing PowerShell, or if you prefer using just a regular DOS window, that is fine as well. But in any event, what we can do is we can navigate to C var demos and actually go into our directory, cd node API. As we can see, there's nothing there. And the way we initiate our node project is by typing npm init. You'll recall that npm stands for the node package manager. So what this will do is it won't actually go and download anything, but it's going to create a file that contains the configuration settings and name of our actual app. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a bunch of the default settings. The name is going to be node_API. The version is going to be 1.0.0. The description, I'll just say my node API, but it can be really anything depending on what project you have. The default entry point is a file called index.js, which is the root of your project. I prefer to call it app.js, so I'm going to just call it app.js. I'm going to skip through a bunch of these next settings, set myself as the author, and boom, it's going to ask me if this is okay, and I'll just type the word yes. So what that actually does is if I do an ls now, we'll see that we have a file called package.json in our directory. And in fact, I use Sublime as my favorite text editor. So what I'll actually do is go ahead and open this folder, C var demos node API, just so that we get a clearer picture of what is going on in the file explorer here. So if we open up package.json, we'll see that it's basically just a text file containing a JSON string or an array of configuration settings. We have the name of our app, the version, the main file that is going to be used to execute our app, the author, etc., etc. So this file we'll get into a little bit more about what it means, what it does later, but it's basically just a file describing our app. Now, if we want to include a package, this Restify package, which is going to help us build our API, it's actually pretty easy. So you'll see here that to install it, we just have to type npm install Restify. So if I head back to my command line from the directory that I have here, let me just make it a bit more clear as to what I'm doing here. There we go. We can type npm install Restify. And one thing I also like to add to that is this save flag. And what that's going to do, again, we'll get into a bit more later, but it's going to say that, hey, in order to run our app, which in this case is our Node API, we require that Restify package be installed in order to use the API. So let's go ahead and run npm install on Restify. npm is going to go and do a bunch of things. It's going to go online and download the actual files that we are going to need. So I'll let it go and do its thing. This is usually fairly quick, but sometimes it can take a little bit. So that's actually done. And, well, okay. So if I actually go into my Sublime again, we'll see that it's added this node modules directory and that it contains another folder called Restify. And this Restify has a bunch of code within it, some JavaScript files. What this has essentially done is created this directory because it saw that I did not have this directory yet in my Node API project. And if I go ahead and look at package.json, it has this new line for dependencies. And it says that Restify is now a dependency, which means that we need it in order to be able to run our API. We'll get into more what, for example, this caret symbol means and how Node handles dependencies and manages them in a future lesson. But for now, let's actually run our Node app. So if I do an ls, we'll see that we have no app.js, which is supposed to be the root file. So let's create a new file called app.js. And within it, we are going to use the default code that's available on restify.com. We paste that in. We save it as app.js in our var demos node API. And then if I go back to my command line, we see app.js, and I'm able to actually run it by typing node app.js. And you'll see this Restify listening at http://8080. So what this means is that our server is actually running already. Anyone that's familiar with PHP, we didn't have to set up Apache or do any other configurations. If I head right to localhost 8080, we'll see that we actually get a JSON response, resource not found, but the code, which we'll go into detail in the next lesson, has this line called server.getHelloName. So what do we think that means? Well, it means that if we actually go to localhost 8080 and type hello, let's say Jim, which is my name, we get this string outputted to the screen, hello Jim. And if I were to say hello Bob, it says hello Bob. And that's because this code here is actually running, listening on port 8080. Again, don't worry, we're going to dive down into the specific nature of what this code is doing. But look how easy it was to actually set up a basic GET request, a basic API call to our local host without having to install or configure or do much of anything. So that's actually it for this lesson. I don't want to go and make this lesson too long, but in the next lesson, we'll look in more detail about how this code is actually working.